of this morning's talk is the challenges of the path. Last week I talked about the various challenges of being an Agni yogi. We discussed what some of the challenges were, and also aspects of life that must be incorporated, that should be incorporated into the life of an Agni yogi. This morning I'm going to continue to talk about these challenges of an Agni yogi, but this morning especially the inner challenges. Okay, the inner challenges. The essence of the life of an accepted disciple, an Agni yogi, now listen to this carefully, is directed to the inner struggle between the lower S self and the capital S self. The essence of the life of the accepted disciple, this is what we are dealing with, the inner struggle between the lower S self and the capital S self. And I will talk more about that in the next few minutes. Here's an example. Most of you have read the Bhagavad Gita, and you will recall that the life of Arjuna, that point in the book where he was, or in the story, where he was engaged in a terrible conflict, a battle in which each human being must fight against himself. That's what it was exemplifying. When that person enters the path of perfection, we don't go into this battle between the lower self and the higher self until we have heard the call. We then awaken and decide to stop fooling around in our life, to make our life substantial, to begin to look for the purpose of our life. When we find that purpose, or we sense that purpose, or recognize that purpose in some form, and begin to manifest it into our day-to-day life, we realize the necessity to travel this path of perfection. So in essence, we are evoking the battle as a result of hearing the call, finding our purpose, and making the decision that we want to travel this path of perfection. So as we travel or enter into this path of perfection, what's important to know is now we're traveling due north. That means we're now finding our way back to our Father's home, back to Shambhala, where the will of God is known. This action puts us or engages us in a terrible battle, terrible conflict between the lower self and the higher self. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was standing on the battlefield midway between the two opposing armies, his forces and the army of his kinsmen. He was confused, and he did not think he should try to defeat family members who were even threatening his survival. The opposing army represented his personality, composed of his physical, emotional, and mental desires and illusions. The spiritual family, the army of the soul, wanted him to stand for right human relations, goodwill, and the unity of all life. The spiritual army wants him to live a virtuous life of self-sacrifice for the furtherment of his evolution or her evolution. If you, because of limited time this morning, I really would like you to think about this battle with Arjuna and his kinsmen or his family, and the family representing his personalities, physical, emotional, mental personality. Really think about this. Look at your family. Look at your biological family. Look at your spiritual family. Look at those that you consider to be part of the circle of your family. And see what you find that they reflect to you, reflect back to you. These two sides of the disciple clash on the battlefield of his daily life, the spiritual life and the other life. They try to continue to fight until either your soul or your personality is victorious. And of course, we want our soul to be victorious and not the personality. The disciple will either fall into terrible crime and inertia, or he is going to be released to a life of sacrificial service for the advancement of the race. So let's take a look at the duality of each body, physical, emotional, mental body. The physical body wants to be lazy. That would be the personality side. The physical body wants to be lazy. The spiritual part of the physical body wants to labor. The spiritual side of a person wants to create labor because through hard labor or work, that person meets many difficulties and obstacles which make him grow. Again, this is the life of the accepted disciple, the Agni Yogi. Not for the common person, not for the unawakened nature. Now the emotional body. The emotional body, the personality side of the emotional body, wants all his or her desires to be fulfilled. But the spiritual side wants what? Joy. Wants joy. Pleasure or desire is something that comes to you, whereas joy radiates out of you. It comes from the inside out. You try to collect things. This is the personality. The emotional body tries to collect things for his own gratification. But the Agni Yogi, the accepted disciple who is radioactive, gives of himself. Because why? Now you're afraid to answer. You know the answer. Because of deep love. Gives of him or herself because of deep love. That's the emotional body. The mental body, the personality side of the mental body loves to collect things, loves to collect knowledge. And now with information internet, we find ourselves collecting more and more and more and more information until our mental body is so puffed up with all that information that we've satisfied the personality life but not the spiritual life. Intellectually developed people who do not feel the pull of the spirit want more and more and more knowledge. More and more possessions. I own this knowledge. I own this book. I own all my degrees. Look how bright I am. And yet, They've forgotten how to feel, how to love, how to give. The spiritual body does not want to be cluttered with all these objects. It wants to give and to sacrifice with no ties, with no expectations. It's like that emotional body, or even the mental body, the emotional body that has accumulated, the mental body that has collected, will say, I will give my knowledge to you, what will you give back? The emotional body says, I will love you, but how much more are you going to love me back? See, the Agni Yogi just gives it, no ties, no expectations. So these two armies are within us. Victory is achieved when the spiritual side conquers the physical, emotional, and mental mess that we are living in. I know. The physical body becomes spiritual when it becomes really industrious. The emotional body becomes spiritual when it tries to give joy and happiness to others. The mental body becomes spiritual when it tries to think of sacrificial things that the person can do so that others have more striving and daring and courage. MM sounded a great call to all of humanity, MM being a great master, a great sage. Of course, all masters are great. He was presenting humanity with the challenge of the spirit, which is the call to battle against the fiery enemy of the personality. Agni Yoga is not giving us a teaching to try to pacify us. Agni Yoga is a teaching that will challenge us to strive for more light and love. The real teaching makes you so angry at your silly life that you really work hard to bring about changes. That's that person who has a sense of purpose, who maybe has a sense of it, doesn't know it quite yet, but has a good sense of direction and will eventually recognize that whole unfolding pattern. Yeah, this is my life purpose. This is what I must do. And pretty soon all the fluff, just blows away. The real teaching makes us so angry at the silly life that we begin to work really hard to change, to become an accepted disciple. The teachings tell us that when you find a teaching that tells you everything is beautiful, leave that teaching. That's not the master's teaching. Sooner or later, that kind of teaching will take your money and your free will too. You will know the real teaching because it is a call to battle. It tells you that only through sacrifice, labor, daring, and even heroic works will you progress. It's really important to remember this. False teachings tell you to stay where you are because everything is beautiful. The real teaching says, get up! You have a lot of work to do if you are going to evolve into a higher kingdom. Whenever you are looking for an easy way out, the teaching says you are entering the most dangerous path. A disciple will not be drawn to things that do not lead to achievement. What are the things that prevent us from achievement? Such things as comforting things, things that are pleasing for the physical, emotional, and mental nature, but they don't lead us to achievement. These things do not lead us to achievement. And you can fight against this statement all you want, but look at the truth underlying, the profoundness of this statement. Comfort flows with the current and eventually carries the disciple over the waterfall of wasted energy. The teaching flows against the current. Common and comfortable things make us give up our quest for a higher path because we surrender ourselves to the lower nature and say, okay, take over, I give up. But when there is a steep path in front of us, the teaching challenges us to climb against all difficulties. And this is when we really progress. So you see how different, being on the path, having a spiritual direction is a completely different life from the mass of humanity. So if you want to continue to incarnate in the same place you left off, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, now to me, that's boredom, then stay as you are. But if you really want to evolve, and you want humanity to evolve, and you want to experience the supermundane world, and be of great service to humanity, then step on this challenging path. Hard work and striving are the real teaching. When you start to accept the teaching as a nice Sunday morning lecture, you have stopped your progress on the path. The teaching tells us that the only way to progress is to create difficulties in our lives. Difficulties, and this is an important phrase, difficulties that lead us to achievement. See, everybody has difficulties in their lives. Everybody. I don't know of a soul that doesn't. But the key here, the secret, the mystery, is that we want difficulties that will lead us to achievement. Easy paths may lead to destruction. Difficult paths collect our energies so that we stay awake and we continue to strive. Eventually, we must achieve a great victory over our nature. If your friends and co-workers seek the easy way, you know that they do not stand for improvement. Master M tells us that when a new person wants to join your organization, your group, that person should be tested. To give him a heavy labor and make him do things that he hates to do. If he refuses or if he complains, then you know that person is not one of you. The teacher, the master, or the Kohan is here to make us work against our lower self, that little s self. They make us progress in such a way that we become the master of our own instrument. The path toward the hierarchy is not paved with sweet words of false praise. And see, most people expect that. Most people are so used to flattery that if you don't flatter them, if you don't praise them, then there's something wrong with you and they will leave. The path toward hierarchy tells us that we are living in a dangerous time and that strong-minded workers are needed to do heavy work with no payment and no reward. That's the time that we are living in now. And look at how humanity fights against that. I will, quote, air quote, I will do something for you if you pay me. I will do something for you if you give me something greater in return. Right? And the employer says, I will give you a raise if. When the employer says that, then he doesn't have loyal or dedicated workers. He has people there that are working strictly for an income. Now, Master M says, and you might want to write this down if you're taking notes, the most difficult is the most accessible. What? What? I read that, I said, what? How could that be? So then I had to really think about it. The most difficult is the most accessible. How could that be? We think that the most difficult thing is the hardest task to accomplish. Okay, so here's a little story. This is what was happening when I said, what? I had to prove this. So when I was a young mother, I found myself on the shore of rising tide waters of the Potomac River with two very young children. They were like 2 and 3. We had to get to higher ground. And the only way to do so was to enter the river and go around a fallen tree to get to the other side and to climb to safety. So I gathered both babies up in my arms, plus our stuff. Here, honey, hold this, you know. I tried to call out for the boy's father, but he couldn't hear me. He was on his own mission for the Smithsonian Institute, so we were on our own. As I entered into the river, I saw a water moccasin, a very venomous snake. Having had various encounters with snakes growing up, I had grown to have a less than healthy fear of them. What to do? I knew we could not stay where we were on the beach. It was too dangerous. The tide's coming in. The water level is up here when the tide is fully in. The sun was setting. The only way to safety was to walk around the fallen tree in the river, the tree that was blocking our way to safety. Yet here was the water moccasin. As I looked at it snaking its way around the tree limb, can you imagine this? And he's on the top of the water. Then looking at my 2 babies, I knew I had no choice. I had to believe that the snake was as afraid of me as I was of him. I had to be clear thinking now. This is where the part of the story reflects the most difficult is the most accessible. I had to be clear thinking and careful. I had to overcome my fear to save our lives. Love of the babies, wanting to protect them, to get them to safety. Then suddenly the snake disappears, goes under the water. I could no longer see him. Where did it go? Was it coming closer, or was he going further out into the river? I forced myself to walk out to the end of the fallen tree and on over to the other side and to safety. Well, this was a test of courage. I learned something about myself in that moment. For myself, it was a heroic action. The most difficult is the most accessible. So here was a victory. And this is how it happened. The hidden energies that are buried deep within us can or will never manifest if we do not awaken them and use them. When there is a need, the energies will be at our service. They will be ready to be used in our persistent quest because we overcame our physical, emotional, and mental bodies, that lower self. So that our spiritual beingness and reality can really reveal itself to us. The persistent quest in the battle against ourself awakens powerful energy. I'm going to repeat this. The persistent quest in the battle against ourselves awakens powerful energies, energies of heroism, austerity, concentration, control, simplicity. All of these things are awakened when our little spoiled child, the physical, emotional, mental bodies, are under the control of Arjuna. The fighting warrior. I have such a pet peeve with there's a psychology where we are taught to respect the inner child. I get it's just something with me, it just grinds me. Because that inner child is the accumulation of Maya, glamour, and illusion. That's what the accepted disciple knows. We're not here to please the inner child. So if this is a path that you're following, that inner child, and you're trying to give into that inner child, think twice. Comfort for the personality, or to be a warrior of spirit. Striving reveals the Agni Yogi's inner divinity, because through striving, he masters his instruments. In this way, he becomes a real help to his fellow man. His associates notice that he is really in control, and they look to him for guidance. By setting an example of victory, the disciple shows others that they too can conquer their obstacles. I have a dear friend who is extremely ill right now. And it just seems like the odds are working against this battle, her health battle. She has been such a wonderful example to me to watch, that she's in a tremendous amount of pain, pain that can only be controlled or tolerated through medication. And yet she's still thinking about her future, still making plans for next week, where most people would be flat down in bed. She has no insurance, so the insurance problem is coming up, the hospital, the surgeon, nobody can do anything to help her until she gets financial assistance. So when she has a life-threatening illness facing her, calling her senator, congressman, trying to get some kind of financial assistance going, at the same time, she's keeping her life intact. That's the warrior spirit. she didn't go to bed and give up. It's so remarkable to me. I'm just so impressed. She's teaching a lot of us about courage. Setting an example of victory. Striving is the building up of spiritual muscles so that all of our internal enemies are destroyed. These enemies, of course, disguise themselves, but the disciple observes himself very carefully and exposes them. He notices gossip. He finds the laziness. He finds his touchiness, and eventually becomes soul-infused and transfigured. Buddha said that blood could not be stopped by blood, but that it could be stopped by, yes, love. Blood cannot be stopped by blood, but it can be stopped by love. Love crushes the accumulation of energy being directed against you. So what happens? We have a choice. This is so simple. If we look at half the world as dark and venomous and full of hatred and malice and all the uglies, and then we have the other half of the world, which is totally permeated with a deep love, deep beauty. What are we going to breathe in? Are we going to breathe in the darkness? And that means to think revengefully, hatefully, I'm going to get even. Or, on the other hand, are we just going to breathe in the beauty and the joy of love? Which is going to help us evolve? Think about that. Love generates its own force so that we do not have to violently attack those who are hurting us, attacking us. If someone is spreading lies about you because of their jealousy, treat them with kindness and love, and you will be tested with this over and over and over until you get it right. The next time they start to tell a lie about you, if you are breathing in love, if you are feeling kindness in your thoughts toward them, they will eventually feel so ugly and awful that they will be ashamed. So just take refuge in this. The advice, do not resist evil, means that you do not lie when someone else does, even if he is lying against you. When somebody does something wrong against you, do not take revenge on that person. The teaching suggests that the best approach is to do something good back so that you overcome the evil that is in him. Someone must say, this is enough. I will stop the accumulation of karma between us. People don't realize the significance of karma. In the end, your karma and his karma is one. Are one. Is our. You can edit that, Catherine. Okay. So by eliminating the karma of someone else, we are eliminating the obstacles on our path. Help your brother and help yourself by not continuing with the karmic accumulation, which will later come back and haunt us. Master M says one must understand action and the everlasting battle with chaos. One must realize it as the only path and grow to love it as a sign of the Creator's trust. It is best for us to understand that the battle is never going to end because we are battling against imperfection. We are a person, an aspirant then a disciple, and then we become an Agni Yogi, an accepted disciple. But we are not yet a master. You work and you become a master, but you are not yet a Kohan. When you become a Kohan, you are not yet a planetary logos, and so on. So greater battles take us to greater levels on the evolutionary spiral. The teaching must manifest in our life as practical guides which direct us during this long battle. The challenges found in battle are directed toward all those forces which prevent our spiritualization and do not let the human soul proceed on the path of perfection. So, the disciple must fight against hypocrisy, totalitarianism, fanaticism, slavery, bribery, and this is something I talked about last week. Fight against flattery, pornography, ego, and vanity, and many other things. These things are not only happening on the physical plane, of course, the Agni Yogi must also fight them on the more subtle planes, where chaos and evil are strong. All of this fight is carried on in the light of hierarchy. Okay, that's it. So what path do you want to be on? The lower self, the capital S self, the personality life, the soul life, the life of an Agni Yogi. If you're gutsy enough to be on this path to become an accepted disciple, then listen to this talk several times. Think about it, and think about your life. Think about your life purpose and how you bring it all together.